Parsha 101, Parshas Behar. This week's Torah portion is actually pretty short, and it focuses on just a few specific things. Most of it has to do with the Shmittah year. And so Behar means on the mountain. It comes from the first verse of the Torah portion. Moshe Behar Sinai Lamar. God spoke to Moshe on Har Sinai, saying, right? So now we're getting the laws of the Shmittah year. The Shmittah is the agricultural Shabbos. The same way that during the week we work for 6 days and we rest on the 7th. So Shmittah year is that we work the land for 6 years and then we rest on the 7th. And this is something that applies to the land of Israel and is still in effect today. The people in the land of Israel keep the laws of Shmittah still. And there are certain, it's part of why kosher in Israel can sometimes be a little bit trickier than outside of Israel, because when it comes to fruits and vegetables and produce and stuff like that, you have to know who's being approved of, like, this is a place that keeps Shmittah. And it's, go the next time you're in Israel, visit a farm, kibbutz someone and talk, ask them how it works, because it is real and it happens today. Now, there's also, lest you think that they're just doing this because, like, oh, it's good for the land, right? So that's why it's got to be done. You got to think about that. It's not just that the 7th year, the land is being, we're just going to let it rest. First of all, that means that in the 6th year, which should be the weakest of all the years, right? Because the first year is the healthiest, right? All the nutrients replenish themselves, and now the land is all healthy again. So now we're going to work it again. First year should be your best year. Second year, pretty good. 3, 4, 5. 6 should be the weakest year. And God promises that when you keep the laws of Shmittah, the 6th year is going to be so bountiful, it's going to keep you for the 6th year. You'll have your regular harvest of the 6th year. Plus, it's going to keep you all throughout the 7th year when you can't engage in any commercial agriculture, basically. And not only that, it's going to keep you through the 8th year until the next harvest is brought in. So it's close to 3 years worth of produce that you will reap when you keep the laws of Shmittah. And this, it says specifically, every seven years, so 6 years, the 7th years, your land, your vineyard, you got to give it a complete rest on that 7th year. And you got to go out, you got to declare that this is all ownerless. Right, the land, this does not belong to me. Anybody who wants to come and take. And that you can walk through someone's fields, and you want a couple grains, wheat or whatever. You're gonna go home and you make bread that night. You could anybody could partake. That was the way Shmittah worked. If someone specifically needed, so you couldn't just engage in your regular commercial agriculture. But let's say you decide, okay, sometime the 7th year, we're gonna replace the pots in the kitchen. Okay, we need a couple extra bucks from that. Where are we going to get it from? So you could kind of harvest enough. If I add X amount of bushels, that's going to give me enough money for the pots. You could do that like on a as needed basis. But there's not big. You're not going out to sow and plant and reap or whatever. It's whatever the ground grows and whatever you can use. And anybody's allowed. It's open for all. Then it tells us that the same way that we have every 6 years, the 7th is the Shmittah year. Every 7 years, every 7 years, so 49 years, the 50th year is called the Yovel year. Now, the Yovel year, the land can't be worked then either. So you go from the 6th year of the last, of the, year 48, year 49, Shmittah, nobody works the land. Then from there you go to year 50, nobody works the land again either, which means that you're not working the land until the cycle resets itself to year 1. So that's going to be almost 4 years, almost 4 years worth that God says, I'm going to provide. Pretty incredible. And there's a lot of promises that are made for this, for keeping Shmittah, for those who keep to this. And there's certain warnings of, like, don't try to get around this. You got to pay attention. So it says, for the Yovel, which is what we call the Jubilee Year, you got to proclaim it. And that's going to be proclaimed on the 10th of the 7th month, which is Yom Kippur. You're going to sound the shofar and say, this is the Jubilee year. Even though technically it started before then, it's going to start on Rosh Hashanah. But that's when it's going to be pronounced. You're going to pronounce it. You're going to proclaim freedom throughout the land. What does it mean, proclaim freedom throughout the land? It's part of what we learned many parshas ago about if someone has a servant, a bondsman, and they work for them for 6 years, the 7th year, they're supposed to go free. Then they're like, no, I don't want to leave my master. I like it here. So they go in the piercer's ear. Remember that whole thing. But when it comes to the Yovel year, the 50th year, that person goes free. There's no sticking around after that. Everybody, there is no indentured servitude anymore in the Yovel year for the Jewish bonds people. And not just that, if someone sells the inherited land, right? This is the land of my father, but someone's looking to make some money or something like that, so they're going to sell a field. In the 50th year, the field goes back to the original owner. That's what happens in the Yovel year. Now, it goes from there, and it says, by the way, speaking of all this kind of stuff, where you're going to buy and sell the Jewish people, you guys are going to do business among each other. Don't cheat each other. And not just that, well, it's going to specify that when we talk about, like, let's say, land sales during Shmittah and the Yovel, you got to take that into account when you're doing your business dealings with each other. So, I could sell you a plot of land, and this land is worth X amount of money, but bear in mind, but Shmittah year or Yovel year or whatever it is, Shmittah year, the land's going to be fouled at the time when the land is going to revert back to its owner, right? You got to take that into account of what the true rate of something should be. So you got to figure out what the workability of the land is. Like, I'll rent you my land for 3 years, right? But if you're renting the land for 3 years, and that's years 5, 6, and 7, they're not getting any work out of the land in the 7th year, right? If I'm going to sell you this plot of land, whatever, and it's year 45. Which means in 5 years from now, there's a Jubilee year. That land's going back to its original owner. You got to prorate your prices, and you got to figure out what the difference is there to charge people fairly. It says also, it kind of uses the word like don't taunt each other in the business dealings, as in don't just give out self-serving business advice, even if it's not bad business advice for the other person, but you're doing it really for yourself. And then a lot of these commandments, God gives the commandment or gives the warning, the prohibition. It says, fear God, I am your God, or different things like that. In general, it's being said because these commandments, follow them because I'm God, right? So that's, I am your God, I took you out of the land of Egypt, that's why you got to follow them. But it's also like, and don't forget, you got to fear God, as in I'm paying attention. Bear in mind that I'm watching everything that's going on. Then it goes to the whole thing that if you follow the rules of Shmittah, you follow the rules of Yovel, you're going to live in your land securely. The land's going to yield its produce. Everything's going to be beautiful and wonderful. I'm going to bless the land, etc., etc. Now, then we go to this idea, which still falls in everything that we've said before, that the land is never permanently sold, right? Why is that? Because God says the land is mine, and you are just sojourners in this land. So when you say, why should I give my land back? Why should land revert back in the 50th year? This is my land. I bought it, or whatever. Why should I give it back to him? It's like, hey, don't forget whose land it is, right? This is my land, and you're visiting. And then there's this whole idea that, let's say if someone, they have to, for whatever reason, they need more money, so they want to sell off some of their, what's called their inherited lands, right? So they're going to sell it off, part of what's theirs. There's an idea that, especially if someone's doing this because they become poor or something like that and looking for, it's not just a regular, let me rent out my land to you, but someone became destitute or poor, they became in a situation where they got to sell off the land. There's an idea of a redeemer coming to get the land back for them. And that would be a family, if it's not the person himself, a family member who's got the means. The person that the land is sold to gets the land for 2 years. After 2 years, this redeemer is now able to come and buy the land, but with also doing the whole prorating thing. Like we were supposed to have it for this year's, or the Yovel, this, that, whatever, and then we're going to get the difference. You still everything's got to be done fairly and keeping everything in mind. But there is this, it's an interesting idea about this redeemer to come and get the land back for the original owner. Now, if the person could buy it back himself, then, do the whole prorating thing, you give back the difference, and that's how it goes. If not, he's got to wait for Yovel, and the Yovel year, the land's going to come back to the original owner. It actually goes into this idea also of a residential home. What if someone wants to sell a home? Right? This isn't, it's on their land or whatever, they're going to want to send a residential home. Is it going to go back in Yovel year? So it depends. Where is this home located? Is this located in a city which during the time of the conquest was a walled city, which is parenthetically part of the rules about Shushan Perm, where the walls there during the time of miracle, etc. Here, we're talking about that when they conquered the land of Israel, was the city a walled city at the time, even if the wall was taken down afterward. So, for example, one city that this always applies to is Jerusalem. Jerusalem was, and it's always been a walled city. The walls are still there. The walls have been there for a very long time. So this is kind of one of the cities that often falls into this kind of category. And of course, there's other cities there that when they came in, there was a walled city. So if it's within a walled city, then if the redeemer, the family member, whoever could come to be the redeemer of this land, they've only got that same year of sale to buy it back. And then after that, it goes, the person who buys it gets to keep it. It does not go back during Yovel. It stays with the purchaser. Now, versus if there's a home in like an open field, not an open field, a home that's not in a walled city, then it will eventually revert back to its original owner. Now, there is also a caution or just an added note that when it comes to Levium, the Levites, they didn't have specific portions of the land. There were 48 cities that were designated for them, and these were going to be their cities, and there was X amount of land around that, and X amount around that amount of land that they had for agriculture and for produce and for things like that. These 48 cities. Now, it's possible that a bunch of Levites could have built another city or whatever during that time, but the laws of the 48 cities has the same idea that definitely that's going to go back to them, but also a Levite at any time can redeem his land back, his land or his home or anything like that back. And it even comes like when it's two Levites dealing with each other. So one Levi buys a home from another Levi, the person who had to sell the home can buy it back at any point. They don't have to wait any certain amount of times, or it doesn't expire after a certain amount of time. They're always able to get their land back. And this specifically applies for the 48 cities. Now, the Torah then goes into this whole thing that, we're speaking about people who might have to sell off their lands or whatever situation they're going through, that specifically if you see someone who's in dire financial straits, you should try to help him, or you got to try to prop him up. There's specific prohibition against loaning with interest. It's actually a very big mitzvah to give someone a loan. It's a very, very big deal to loan. So get together with some friends and everybody can exchange loans with interest free. You can't even give a loan on the condition of interest or anything like that. Now, there is a difference, kind of the way that this is sometimes dealt with, is there's a difference between making an investment and then you gain a profit from your investment versus making a loan and then charging interest on the loan, right? So if a guy's like, hey, can I borrow $10,000 for my business? Versus saying, hey, I want to be a $10,000 partner with you in your business, right? Because now you're like an active participant in the business versus trying to make more money off of the money that you've already have. Right, the whole thing, but that's basically the basic idea of it. Then it goes into this thing now, the Jewish bondsman, right? So that's someone who maybe he stole something and then he couldn't pay it back, or maybe he came to the point where he was just so poor and he couldn't provide for himself, so he sells himself as a servant. And the Torah very specifically says you're not allowed to give him degrading work. You got to treat him as like a regular employee, right? He's not your slave. You can't just make stuff up for him to do. You can't give him tasks that have no purpose or no meaning to them. Also, of course, he's going to go free during the Yovel year, and when he does go free, he's gonna return to his original status. You can't go around and be like, oh look, there's the former bondsman, right? There's the former servant over there, etc. And God specifically says you don't call someone out for being a servant because you're my servant. You're also a servant, right? I paid for you when I took you out of the land of Egypt. That's when you became my servants. We know Moshe told Paro, Moses said to Pharaoh, let my people go so they may serve me. That's what it was. Right? Now, there's also kind of a side Chassidic note of it, is that a lot of people, they're enslaved 6 days of the week. You're enslaved to your work regimen. You're kind of like an indentured servant 6 days a week to the way the world works, to the job, to things like that. And Shabbos comes, the seventh day, that is when we are free. We are free from the regular work day. We're free from the work that we could be enslaved to. We're free from just the regular stuff that's going on. Right, and it's a day of elevation, it's a day of spirituality and holiness, etc. And it also says a Jewish bondman, by the side thing, is that he can't be sold publicly in like a slave market or anything like that. Then it talks about non-Jewish bondservants. So, because all the nations in the land of Israel were supposed to be kicked out, these non-Jewish bondservants are usually coming either from any of the surrounding nations, or anything like that. Or maybe someone who lived in the land did have like a not Canaanite father or something somehow. There's not limitations on their service. So in regard to that, they're not going free during the Yovel year. This is specifically for a Jewish bondsperson. Then it talks about someone who's called, this is what the Parsha wraps up with, it's called a resident alien. As in a non-Jew who comes to the land of Israel, to live in the land of Israel while you're there, and to live under the Jewish rule. And this person has renounced idolatry, but he is not specifically converted, right? So he agrees to live by Jewish law, but he's not a convert. So it says that a Jewish bondsperson should not be sold to him, as a general idea. Bad enough that he has to become a bondsperson, he shouldn't be also sold to someone who's not Jewish. But if he is, then it's up to people should try to redeem him. That if this comes about, then first of all, definitely he could be redeemed at any point, and he should be redeemed at any point. There's no terms of service in that. There's no limits in the terms and the rights of the redemption. That should happen as soon as possible. That someone should come and try to buy him off and set him free. So it starts with the brother, the uncle, the relative, basically anyone who can make it happen should and must make it happen. Now he also only works until the Yovel, because he's still. This is the Jewish law: is that the Jewish bondservant goes free during the Yovel. Now, also, if someone does come to redeem him, you still have to do the whole prorating thing of he's supposed to be serving you for this amount of time, but we're taking him early, whatever. It still has to be a fair, I guess you could say, transaction for this. It also says that he can't be subjugating to any backbreaking labor. He should be regarded as an employee, kind of like someone, I hired him for the year. That's the way he should be regarded as. These are part of the laws. When someone comes to live among the Jewish people, they gotta follow these things. And God says again, you gotta make sure he's redeemed, because all the Jewish people are my servants. It says goes into this whole thing, don't make any idols or sculpted images. There's this thing that they made pavement stones or something to worship on, and that can be anywhere within the base of Mikdash. God wraps up. He says, keep my Shabbos, my Shabbases, as Shabsosai. Keep my sanctuary. You should fear my sanctuary, and I am God. That is the end of this week's Parsha.